How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We got Bryan Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly here, as well as Bill Behrens, Vice President of the NWA. We're going to be talking a lot about television and wrestling and that marriage of convenience and everything else and major importance for the last 50 years. And Bill Behrens probably knows more about television syndication of wrestling than just about anyone, because his primary job is a television syndicator, and wrestling is more of his avocation than his vocation. And wrestling syndication has changed so much, and a lot of people have asked so many television questions. If you got questions about television costs, how you can make money or how you can't make money doing that, why territories probably cannot exist the way, well, they cannot exist the way they did in the 80s and things like that, this is the guy to talk to. This is the show to call in. So you can call in for that in about a half an hour when we get to that. Bryan, how are you today? I do not hear Bryan.
Can you hear me now?
Now I do, yes. Okay. What's going on?
I'm doing good.
Okay. Before, we'll talk to you about Lita, because I didn't listen, but I know you did. Tough Enough starts tonight at 10 p.m., and right after SmackDown, so I think we'll all be watching that show. It's gotten some good reviews, and I'm sure we'll be talking about Tough Enough tomorrow. New Japan had its stockholders meeting today. There was no real huge news that actually came out of that. They didn't announce anything publicly of what's going on behind the scenes. They basically said that everything's fine, and they are working on a big Sapporo Dome show on July the 20th, which we've been talking about a lot. A lot of stuff coming out of the WWF as far as the developmental system. There was the overhaul that had been hinted and the cuts that had been talked about for literally months. Today was the day. They dropped the Memphis territory. They fired Terry Golden. They're not going to have anything to do with that. They have hired Les Thatcher, and they are now affiliated with Heartland Wrestling. So some of the Memphis guys, let me see the names I got around here. The Island Boys and Steve Bradley, Victoria. I don't have the names in front of me, do I? Oh, no, yeah, I do.
Lance Cade,
Haas Brothers. Right, yeah, those guys are all going to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati and Louisville are not very far apart, so there's going to be a lot of guys going back and forth between Heartland Wrestling and Ohio Valley Wrestling. That's going to be the WWF developmental territories. The guys who I didn't mention, which includes, Spanky and American Dragon, and Joey Abs, and some of those guys are being cut. A couple other guys, several others are being cut. Sylvester Turkai, Mike Howell, Brian Keck. And actually there'll be more decisions on guys being cut and made in the next couple of days, I think. But the basic situation is that if they send, say, a wrestler who's not booked or a group of wrestlers, they can work for both territories because it's like a 2-hour drive, I think, from Cincinnati to Louisville. And Jim Cornette and Les Thatcher, we've had both had on the show many, many times. They get along. Les Thatcher worked for Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They have similar ideas about wrestling, and I think it was just felt that they'll train the guys better. There is a lot of holes in that system, and I think that they're readily admitting that what's happened is there's come to a point where some of the guys have been in the system, like Rodney, Joey Abs, those guys, for a couple of years now, and it's either it's time to bring them up or not, and I guess the decision was not, and so they're being cut. And what happens is that that they're turning out a lot of guys, but I guess that the feeling is that the guys are not ready for the roster. And again, now I've seen all the Ohio Valley guys plenty of times. The Memphis guys I have not seen a lot of, so I'm not really fair to judge them. I had seen American Dragon and Spanky, especially when they first broke in under Shawn Michaels, and I thought they were really, really good. And I think that the fact that they have been cut is probably a sign of the future of what they perceive as the importance of the light heavyweight division. And it doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise anyone, because we talk about it on the show probably 3 times a week, but it's just the reality. And it's just the reality of how the WWF sees things. And that's that. Anything else? You got any comments on that?
I think there's been a lot of stuff happening down in Memphis for a long time that led up to this, and I don't think it's much of a surprise that this happened, and I've been hearing stories for a long time about just Memphis and Terry Golden and everything, so I can't really say I'm surprised. I am kind of surprised at some of the guys that they did cut. I mean, like you were talking about, a lot of light heavyweight guys were said to be pretty good. And, Jim Ross talking in the Ross Report all the time about, I really wish we'd do something with our light heavyweight division. And as it turns out, they're not going to.
Yeah. Now, the Terry Golden stuff, that was an inevitability. Terry Golden's relationship with WWF was started because Jerry Lawler pretty much, was at odds with Randy Hales at the time, and basically convinced Vince McMahon and Jim Ross, probably more Vince McMahon, to go with that Terry Golden would be better. And, Lawler at the time had a lot of stroke. Then Lawler and Terry Golden had the falling out, and then, which has nothing to do with the fact that Lawler doesn't work for the company now, because they had a falling out, and there were just all kinds of problems. And, I mean, there are a lot of stories. I mean, some that happened over this last weekend and some that happened before of just, the whole thing with Bobby Eaton. And, I just remember one person in that company that I saw about a month or two ago, and just talking about developmental. And it was just they were just about Memphis, and it was just like, oh, Memphis. You know what I mean? Something's got to be done about Memphis. So I knew that the days were numbered for Memphis. Plus, if their TV, they don't really book any TV, and I think they like the guys, the kind of TV that Cornette books, because the Cornette TV gets people ready, and I'm not sure that the Memphis TV, which was just a bunch of matches thrown together with not so much programs and things like that. I think I don't know. It didn't seem like guys were advancing as quickly. So they'll get different training from West Thatcher, the ones that are kept, and there are far more changes that are going to be made as far as developmental, as far as California, Puerto Rico. I think there's going to be some changes there as well. Let's see, what else do we got? Let me see. The GHC Junior Heavyweight Tournament, that's the NOAH group. They have a Final Four, which will be Saturday at D4 Ariake. It's going to be Yoshinobu Kanemaru against Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Kikuchi beat B.J. Whitmer today. And the other one's Juventud Guerrera against Naomichi Marufuji, which will be a hell of a match. Guerrera beat Satoru Asako yesterday. I'm going to read the poll results because nobody tampered for the first time in it seems like weeks. Nobody
and the last time in weeks, I'm sure now.
I know. Oh, well, that's why I'm reading them. So probably the last time for weeks I'll be reading them. Anyway, who should win King of the Ring? Kurt Angle, 41%, Edge, 10%, Christian, 14%, Rhino, 24%, and a last-minute entrant, 12%. Let's see what else we got here. On the show, Win Ben Eckstein's money. Not Ben Eckstein, that's the guy who used to be on our show, on our station.
Uh-oh. Looks like we lost Dave there. Till he gets back, I guess we'll talk a little bit about the LIDA conference call that I listened to today. And TNN and USA, or TNN and WWF do a lot of conference calls with guys. They did the one with Taz and Al Snow a couple of weeks ago, where basically they talked about Tough Enough. They had one with Big Show where he talked about eating and whatever. So anyway, they had the LIDA conference call today, and basically she talked about how happy she was with the WWF. And really nothing major of note. I can only get through about a half hour of this conference call because usually there's enough calls to last about an hour and people ask somewhat intelligent questions, but today the questions ran out about 5 minutes in, and so they were basically asking people, begging people to call in and ask questions, and it lasted about a half hour, and she talked a little bit about training down in Mexico and talked about some of the people that had trained her in her career and everything like that, but really nothing major of note on the chat, so I guess that's all I have to say about that. And I believe Dave is back.
I am back. Yes, I am.
I talked about it in the conference call, and there was nothing of note, so that's
I read your report on it. It actually was really sad. Plus,
it's just one of those things where how many times can you ask about the woman's title? You know what I mean?
Because
she answered the question once, and it was like people just kept calling and asking about it. It was kind of sad because I felt bad for this girl that, she has been to Mexico. She was in ECW. She's done a lot of stuff in the WWF, and, nobody had any questions for her.
You know what's funny about Lita? And they're promoting her very, very hard because she's got the video coming out. She's on the cover of the Raw magazine and everything. And I realized when reading that stuff, there's two things. First of all, there's no depth to the women's division in that you don't know anyone as characters at all. They're just kind of like thrown out there, and like there's really like there's no questions to ask. And then also you got the problem of the WWF in that there's no way you can really answer the questions either. You know what I mean? Because it's like you have to, there's things that you can't say. So unless it's a character with a lot of depth, or somebody like Hunter, who knows is really knowledgeable guy, or somebody like that, or Mick Foley, who's was great on those conference calls. I think those conference calls,
or even Big Show was pretty good.
Well, because he's been around and people, he was pretty good.
And there are a lot of questions that you can ask Mr. Show.
Yeah, but with Lita, like, what do you ask?
Yeah,
I mean,
it was one of those things where I got a thing saying there was going to be a Lita conference call, and my first thought was, how can this even be? What do you ask her about? Besides, like, her training. I mean, the only thing I could think of that would be of any interest is, training down in Mexico.
And just her making it. Like, since she's been there, it's like, she caught on, through, whatever reason people catch on. But there's no, like, okay, she caught on, she can do a Hurricane Rana. What do you think about wrestling China? She can't answer the question except for,
the funniest thing was when they first asked the question about China, she goes, well, I was disappointed in the match, and then she talks for about another minute, and then all of a sudden, so I was happy with it, and then, she just goes on, and I thought, man, it's just like WWF when Vince in somebody's headset, or Jim Ross, and all of a sudden they change what they're saying.
Yeah. Let's see, any other news before we start with emails?
I believe that's it.
Okay. This is about Jacques Rougeau in the 93,000. He goes at the Silverdome. The one thing that you got to realize about the 93,000 is it's not that Jacques was lying. I mean, I sort of groaned, and the show was at its end when he said that, because it's like basically, except for me and Bryan, everyone in wrestling actually believes that's the real number. It's not like that they're. It's
not like Vince had a meeting and went, okay, we got 78,000 people here. We're going to lie and say 93. I mean, everyone that was at the show believed there were 93,000 people there.
Hey, I believe there were 93,000 people there for like 8 years for 8 years after it happened, until in the course of a conversation with somebody who actually knew, and they just sort of said, by the way, and it's like, wait a minute, and it's like, no, so anyway, that was the deal. Anyway.
And one of the other things, I should mention this also about the Lita conference call, because if anyone listened to it, Paul Heyman has been in this company for I don't know how long, and she worked for him when she was in ECW. And she's talking about how, when I was in ECW, I never really talked to Paul, and I've said hi to him in a couple of things, when he's been here in the WWF, but, I really don't talk to him that much, and everyone has people that they talk to and confide in. But I think some people have this impression that if you're in the WWF, you literally know absolutely everything that's going on, like you're going to know who's going to win King of the Ring and all this stuff, and they don't. I mean, they have no idea. I'm sure Lita has no idea what in the hell's in store for Jeff Hardy on Sunday. I'm sure she has no idea who's going to win King of the Ring. None of this stuff here. And, all these wrestlers backstage at WrestleMania 3 being told there's 93,000 people, I mean, they don't know any better, and I'm sure that they all really believe it.
And they all believed that Bret Hart was going to be in Memphis the next day, too.
Yeah.
Next day. Let's see. I just finished watching Starrcade 98. God, it was horrible. When it was over, it got me thinking. I know Kevin Nash was the booker, but the buck stops with Bischoff. Why didn't Hogan complain to Eric to try to overrule the fact that Nash would be the first one to beat Goldberg? Did Nash use the Finger title win as bait or what? I just don't see Hogan's ego allowing Nash to get the first win over Goldberg. What was the story? That was a long, involved story, and it was done months ahead of time, and the deal was Hogan had a lot of people were really rebelling against Hogan as far as the wrestlers because of the feeling he was holding people back and things like that, and Nash was kind of like the champion of the wrestlers because he was kind of like the team leader, which was not good, but he's got a lot of personal charisma. If you ever hear, when we have people on the show, everyone likes him. He's got this knack of everybody liking him. And anyway, the deal is that they made a deal, and that was that Hulk Hogan would work everyone, and and it was so I'll tell you what. Speaking of things that guys fall for. There were so many people in that company, not all, I would say 25% didn't fall for this one at all, but like probably 60, 70% did. When Hogan said he was going to retire, it was like, come on. He's retiring and we're putting Hulk Hogan videos on every show after he said he's retiring. This is not wrestling. This is not how it operates. They're going, no, he's really retiring. The worked story that came out was that, Kevin Nash was made Booker, and Hulk Hogan was so mad at Kevin Nash for being named Booker because the two of them didn't get along, wink, wink, that Hulk Hogan was going home because he's not, he wasn't going to be pushed on top and all that. So Kevin Nash comes in as Booker, and he's the champion of all the little guys because he got rid of Hulk Hogan that nobody could get rid of. So the basic deal was that for doing that is that, I guess Nash got to beat Bill Goldberg first, and the flip side of that is that Hulk Hogan would then get to be champion the next year as a heel when he made his big comeback at the Omni in front of 38,000 people or whatever the number was, and I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember that they never drew another crowd in Atlanta half that again after that one finger poke deal and that Bill Goldberg stupid thing with Elizabeth, which was one of the really memorable, horrible TV shows as far as that company goes, as compared to the unmemorable, horrible ones that were actually all over the place. And that was the deal that was made. Nash, didn't have to do a job. Hogan got the belt. He was happy. Nash was happy he got to be the Booker. He got the respect of theoretically, he would get the respect of the guys for those 3 months that Hogan wasn't there because he slayed the dragon.
He got to beat Goldberg.
He got to win over Goldberg, and in exchange, he would give Hogan the title, and Hogan would have so much heat on him because he got this belt that he didn't deserve because Nash just laid down for him, and Nash would not have to do a real job. And that was the plan. So that's why. It was a hell of a dumb plan for business, but it was a great plan for them in their minds.
Yeah, for business it was horrible, but what an ingenious plan for those two.
It was a hell of an ingenious plan when you sit down and think about it, wasn't it? I mean, compared to most of the plans in WCW, that one was clever as hell,
If people would have thought out plans like that actually would have helped business, they'd be kicking ass today.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I remember that period, and I knew the Hogan thing, believe me, I knew the Hogan thing was a work from day one and I knew that Hogan was coming back and winning the title all along, but I'll tell you what, I did not know that Nash and Hogan had cooked that deal up beforehand, that the whole thing was Nash, that whole way that deal worked out. It wasn't until that was over where I could look back and go, my God, look at how ingenious those guys really were with that deal. Anyway. This is from Scott Keith, who goes, great show with Jacques Rougeau yesterday. While the callers, I feel sorry for the callers. We had full bank of calls, and I think we got to one call the whole show because, well, to make a long story short. Anyway, while the callers might not have liked the long wait, I loved his detailed stories, and I wish it would have been a 3-hour show. Has the WF actually released a buy rate for Judgment Day? Yes, they have. It was 1.13, I think. It was better than I thought it would be. And I'm skeptical of it, too, but that's another story. I've had a ton of people who write to me since Raw and suggest the WF is going to have Austin tap out to both Benoit and Jericho at the same time on Sunday and then vacate the title. Then Austin can beat both of them on Raw with Vince's help and regain it on Monday. I suppose it's possible. I don't expect that.
I think that'd be a horrible idea, but
yeah,
it's
I don't
possible.
expect it, but yeah, it's possible. Speaking of which, as far as Benoit goes, exactly what's going to happen with Chris Benoit with his neck injury and everything, it's still undetermined. He had some testing done yesterday. He's seeing a doctor, I think, today or tomorrow. It's pretty much acknowledged that Benoit's going to be taking some time off. What that time frame is and when it is will probably be determined in the next couple of days. He's going to work Sunday. He's going to work Monday. He'll work as long as they need to do the injury angle or to do some storyline reason or whatever they want to do to get him out of the picture. But he's going to be out, he may be out most of the summer or he may be out some of the summer. And I think we'll know a lot more about that probably by Monday or Tuesday. So that's the update on him. Let's see what else we got here. This is someone who was reading something on the AD Abu Dhabi Combat Club news page about Sakuraba. Wow. I do know with Abu Dhabi why people would say this. Oh, there's some really nice things that they said about me, but then again, it's Jeff Osborne who would say nice things about me. Said a lot more nicer things than this. But anyway, they're just talking about Kazushi Sakuraba and the reason that
Are you being sarcastic when you say nice things about you?
Oh, no, I am not being sarcastic.
Okay.
He has, Jeff Osborne, who has a pro wrestling background. He did pro wrestling on an independent level, and now he does promotes Hook and Shoot in Evansville, Indiana, which is a mixed martial arts show, and they've really built up a following. They drew over 3,000 people to one of their last shows. he has, they have a television show on, I think it's the NBC affiliate in Evansville, a weekly show which builds up their shows, kind of like an old style pro wrestling. And, on times where I've been on clips where he's been in different parts of the country, he always has really nice things to say. But anyway, he talks about the Wrestling Observer newsletter and talks about how the most respected pro wrestling publication anywhere, as well as a fantastic source for information on Japan fighting scene, is reporting that Sakuraba will not face Silva in a rematch in July, not because of the injuries in the match to Silva, but due to a liver problem. Sakuraba, one of the greatest fighters the sport's ever seen, is suffering from liver disease. According to the Observer, Sakuraba has reportedly consumed alcohol nearly every night over a 2-year period, which may have contributed to the liver damage. It is expected Sakuraba will return to the ring sometime in 2001, but there's no date. Actually, he's going to fight July 29th. The idea is they're going to put him against an easy opponent. And then the idea right now they're looking for is November 3rd at the Tokyo Dome to do the biggest Pride show ever with Sakuraba Silva rematch. So anyway, that's the deal there. And in fact, I did report that that was in the Observer.
Well, that was the story for a while.
That is the story.
Well, I mean, as far as him not fighting.
Oh, yeah. Originally he wasn't going to fight, but I think that the feeling was because they got such a big arena that they got to fill, that they got to get him on the card. But yeah, no, originally, that's why he's not fighting Silva right now, because the original plan was Sakuraba Silva for this show. That's why they booked such a big arena. And the reason he's not fighting is not injuries from the Silva fight, but because his liver had not fully recovered as quickly as they expected from all the damage from all the drinking. So anyway, a lot of emails about Jacques Rougeau. Boy, people liked that show yesterday. Let's see. Let's play Where Would They Be Now? What would have happened to Ricky Steamboat if he had not been injured and forced to retire? I think he would have had to turn heel to stay fresh. Do you think there would have been money made with a heel Steamboat and a face Flair? And has Steamboat ever been a heel? I don't remember Steamboat ever wrestling as a heel, not after, once he became a big star, when they made him a big star in the Carolinas in the late 70s, he never had a heel run at all. There were matches that he was booed in. I remember when Luger was a heel and he was a face, it was a 50-50 reaction. And in fact, when Flair wrestled him in many matches in the 90s, it was a 50-50 reaction, and some where Flair was cheered above Steamboat. But, I think that was more because it was so cool to cheer Flair. I don't think it was a negative on Steamboat so much, although some did because of the family man image, and they thought that, Steamboat was a kind of, as he got older, I don't know how to explain it, but it was that old time, he was in like an old-time babyface, and he was such an incredible worker and sold so much that a lot of newer fans kind of didn't get into him as much. As far as like what would,
I think he used to tell people too that one of the reasons that he never turned heel was he just thought it was so much easier to be a great babyface.
For him, not for most people, it's not.
Yeah, for him.
Well, he knew how to work it. I mean, Ricky Steamboat was one of the greatest in-ring workers I ever saw. Ricky would be 48 years old now. So if he had not gotten injured when he did in the match, I think it's an accumulation of things, but the match with Steve Austin in, I think, 94, which forced his retirement, he probably would have wrestled a couple more years, I suppose. I don't think he'd still be wrestling now. It's possible it's doing indies or something. He hasn't even done one comeback match, so, I don't know. He's a guy who a lot of wrestlers think should have been hired as a coach. And there's a lot of political reasons. He sued both companies, so there was a lot of bitter feelings on both sides, regarding Steamboat, as far as like after his career was over. And then during his career, he had filed different lawsuits against both companies at various times. So anyway, I think that's what happened there as far as like for merchandising and things like that. Okay. I think if they were going to have a stalker angle, it should not have been DDP. It should have been Canyon because he seems more likely to do that sort of thing. DDP's a bigger star.
He does?
I don't know. So much for Mr. Canyon. Is Vince McMahon making it tough for Shane Douglas to find work? I heard Vince will sue Douglas if he attempts to work any indie show because of Shane's comments made about the WF and a few of its workers a few years back. Is that true? No. I don't believe that that's true at all.
No way.
No. Shane Douglas, the story why Shane Douglas can't work is because he's still getting paid by Time Warner, and Time Warner is waiting to breach these contracts of anyone who wants who does it. So a lot of these guys who want to work indies, until they stop getting their Time Warner paychecks, are not allowed to work indies, and I think that's the whole deal with Shane. And once that's over, Shane can do whatever he wants.
It makes for a good story, though. Oh, sorry, I can't do your show. Vince might sue me.
Yeah. In your opinion, do you think Lita has had breast enhancement surgery? I can tell you.
Come
this
on
one.
now.
Okay. Look at a tape of Lita in ECW and look at a tape of Lita in the WWF, and
she just went through puberty.
Okay. No, talk talk to your girlfriend about that one. She'll tell you. Anyway, okay, more on Josh.
That question was not brought up at the press conference, by the way.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Let's see. What was Dynamite Kid's account of the Jacques Rougeau incident? He's got a book out, which has his account in detail. I just remember, it wasn't, it was more slanted towards his side, but as far as the details of what happened, the actual physical things that happened in both things, they're pretty similar. It's just a question of, which side of the story. Dynamite Kid was a very vicious man and a very tough man, and he inspired fright in many wrestlers in the mid-'80s. I can tell you that. And he was an awesome worker, but do you believe Rena Mero's lawsuit had any merit to it? I believe that there were aspects of what she said in the lawsuit, as far as the accounts and things. I'm sure those accounts of specific incidents were true as far as, realistically, did they make her do things that she wasn't going to do? If she had said, it's like there's an inherent thing where, if you start saying no a lot and you're a woman, or even a guy, but especially if you're a woman in wrestling, they'll just get another one to take your place. And so there's that feeling that you really can't say no. And I'm sure she did things that she probably in some ways wishes she didn't, but she made tons of money doing them. It's kind of an ethical thing. You come in with the big religious background, and then they ask you to take your clothes off for just incredible amounts of money, and you do it, you make incredible amounts of money. I don't know. As far as like the suit, the suit was settled, so everyone's as happy as they're going to be. It's done. It's a dead issue. But as far as her accounts, hey, WF is not a perfect world. I'm sure those incidents happened. Does that mean that she should have made $100 million or whatever she was suing for? Probably not. And she didn't, so I don't know.
Now, what was the story about a hole in the dressing room wall?
Yeah, I think that there was a hole in the dressing room wall and the guys were peeping Tom. Now, you don't believe that any of those WF wrestlers would actually, drill a hole in a dressing room wall somewhere?
Well, I'm just thinking, it's not like there's one building that they run every show in that you can put a hole in. It's like there'd have to be a hole in every building in America.
No. She only said it happened once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised that
I wouldn't put it past them if it only happened one time.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like they did it in that they were peeping on her in every dressing room in every building, because then we could go to 50 buildings all around the country to find that peeping Tom, peeping hole,
Yep.
So anyway, no, that was just like an incident that she did only have once. We got Bill Behrens on the line. Bill, what's happening today?
Hello there. How are you all doing?
Hey,
we're doing really good.
Good. Oh, I see. I came in at a good time. We're talking about people spying on women.
Yes.
Yes. Bill, one of the reasons that I was so anxious to get you on this show is your background in television syndication. And besides, Bill's also promotes NWA Wildside, which has, actually, as far as distribution goes, probably has more distribution, has more distribution on television than any promotion in the United States except for the World Wrestling Federation, and vice president of the National Wrestling Alliance. So if you want to call in about NWA business or, how that thing's going, you can do that. But I wanted to ask you, it's a television syndication business, and you've been around it for a long time. As it affects wrestling, how would you basically, in a nutshell, describe the changes from, say, the 70s, 80s, and today's environment?
Well, in the 70s were different than the 80s, and the 80s are dramatically different than today. In the 70s, professional wrestling shows found their way predominantly onto television through cooperation with the TV stations. There wasn't a fee paid by the promoter. Rather, the local station in general saw an opportunity to do what was in essence local programming. They usually helped produce it, and there are 800 examples. Don Owens' promotion, CWA, which became USWA, even Fritz von Erich's thing started on a Christian station literally in Dallas. All of them got going cooperatively with the TV stations. And that was the earlier time. It goes back, probably to the beginnings of wrestling, where wrestling was considered to be a viable product that they could market and sell to local advertisers. The 80s came in, and Vince McMahon expanded, and when he did, he went into those local markets and he said, what if I give you a fully produced program, so now you don't have to produce it, I give you at least half the commercial time, and I pay you promotional dollars because I'm probably going to come to town and promote. And in many cases, why don't I just pay you? Which is one of the great pitches in syndication. It's the easy one. I'm going to pay you, and therefore you're going to love my show. And that's what expanded the WWF at that time and effectively, slowly but surely eliminated nearly every to almost every local show that was out there. In fact, until very recently, the only show that had survived was the Memphis promotion. Everybody else had gone away either immediately or eventually. Spin forward to now, and because of that, pretty much to get on TV, you've got to pay. And if you can find a way to avoid paying, you've hit the mother lode. Fortunately, because I syndicate programming for a living, the only reason the people I work with have been able to survive for the time they have, and that goes back to the end of USWA and Smoky Mountain and various other promotions, is I don't pay. So I fight the system, and normally the system eats you up the way it exists now. Stations are not looking for wrestling.
Now your deal with not paying is you don't really care what time the show airs. You're not specific as, oh, this has got to air at 8 o'clock p.m. on a Wednesday night or whatever. It's just like, you know, if you have a spot here that's open, can I put my show in here? Is that basically it?
Yeah, well, it can be. It depends. I mean, you know, in some cases, like in Philadelphia, the same station that ECW used to pay you to be on, we're on Monday nights at midnight, and have been on relatively in the same kind of time periods they were on for the entire time they existed. But that's because that's what they wanted the show at the time. We never talked about money; it never came up. Now, in Atlanta, at one point, I was on at 2:30 in the morning because that's all that was there. I snuck into a paid programming time period because they let me, and sales didn't notice. The programmer never told them, and until the station was sold, it survived. So yeah, I do go the area of least resistance. Now, if you're promoting the market, then obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but you do need to have then, depending on how you're promoting, an effective time period you can promote off of. And you probably have to do your show very specifically to promote your house. Bert Prentice, for example, in Nashville is a master at that. He'll get a 9:30 a.m. time period, do a big commercial that's criticized for its content, and then draw enough to make money that night at the Nashville Fairgrounds. That's a very specific business because he's doing it 52 weeks a year, every Saturday. In my case, we don't have to draw that much. We fuel ourselves by the TV and by the perception of the size that Wild Side, in theory, is. I mean, by attrition, we've become the #2 television promotion, which is pretty cool. You know, if more people go away, who knows? We could be #1. But
not this year, though.
No, it's going to take a while at least. WWF has to try to launch WCW before that potential problem occurs. But, I mean, basically, most people who go into wrestling perceive that if I get my show on television, I will therefore be able to draw and make huge bucket loads of money and become wildly successful. And the reality is it's the opposite. Television will eat you up unless you know the rules.
I mean, realistically, the cost of television was probably the prime reason for the downfall of both Smoky Mountain and ECW. I mean, ECW had other problems too, but if Smoky Mountain did not have to pay for their TV, I'm not saying they would have lasted until today, but that was the cost that always kept them from ever really making money.
Well, it's a combo package, and Smoky suffered from it, ECW suffered from it worse. Which, it's not just that. It's also, if you get into the position when you're not the biggest dog in the pound of guaranteeing contracts, and Smoky Mountain at the time, you know, Ricky and Robert were getting $500 a week. The Thrill Seekers, Lance Storm and Jericho were getting $500 a week. Bob was getting his money. Everybody was getting a guaranteed salary at certain levels, and even people that were working spots were getting reasonable pay. Corny suffered from, to an extent, being one of the boys. Same thing Dusty Rhodes is suffering from now. I mean, at the low end, he'll pay somebody $100 because he just doesn't want to be that guy that doesn't do that. And the end result, unfortunately, is, and it's the old Jerry Jarrett thing that he told me, you know, you got to remember who's paying the bills on this thing. And the one thing that's always true is the boys always go out, leave the building, in theory, with money. The promoter doesn't necessarily. And he's paying all the bills that get you into there, and if there's TV involved, more. So yes, TV was a piece of it with Smoky Mountain, but it wasn't the whole problem. It was that the expenses were far greater than the revenue Jimmy could scramble to get. And believe me, he scrambled as hard as anybody I've ever seen and was masterful at it. But he got to the point where he had to promote bigger and bigger shows to keep creeping toward breaking even. And after a while, and it was after the Super Bowl, which was a hell of a show. If we didn't do another Super Bowl, Knoxville wouldn't show up to see it. 300 people would show up, and when you've got a payroll that you've got to pay based on that gate, you're screwed. And that's eventually what came back to haunt him.
You know, you just said something, and it's funny because we had Jacques Rougeau on yesterday, and somebody sent me a letter about the history of Montreal wrestling, which will be in the Observer probably next week. It's an awesome letter. But anyway, the gist of the letter was a history lesson of Montreal wrestling, which portended a lot, actually, if you look at the WWF with the WCW thing, because, you know, they had two, and when I thought back on it, you know, and I written about the roller derby thing in Detroit, and in a lot of territories when there was a big fight, and of course the WWF WCW was a big fight, but on a national level. At the beginning, wrestling got really hot with the big fight, and then after a while, it cooled off, as wrestling is going to do.
Well, anything will do that. That's cyclic in all programming. There's always the hot period, and then it starts to skew in television older, or people stop caring as much. So yeah, that's very much true.
Oh, that's what's happening with SmackDown, skewing older.
Yeah, well, it's not really getting older, it's that the younger people are leaving, which is making it older.
Right, well, and that's the most cyclic of the audiences. They're the hardest to get attracted and to hang on to, but when you get them, they can artificially pop what you're doing, sometimes for as much as a year and a half, 2 years. You know, Power Rangers is the great teenage example, you know, or Ninja Turtles before that. And in essence, wrestling has periodically, during a variety of cycles, suffered from or benefited from that same reality.
Yeah, and what happens is eventually one of the two groups goes down. Mm-hmm. They end up working together, and they, at the beginning, working together, and everyone thinks they get the dream matches, and the dream matches do huge business, and then they have nowhere to follow. And the amount, and so many of those cities, Atlanta probably being the best example of one that didn't suffer that fate, now that I think about it, in the 70s, but Montreal and Detroit certainly, the established promotion that won ended up as a loser too, because they were gone pretty quick after they won.
Yeah, and honestly, I personally feel that the dream match giveaway is a big mistake. You know, right now, for example, with WCW set potentially, and I guess all you can say is potentially until they do it, relaunch WCW, my biggest fear is that it's going to be booked out of the same room that the WWF is booked. The key difference, and this is a television reality.
It will be right now, which was something that I have a lot of qualms about as well.
Well, and the problem is, and if you've ever paid, and I know you have because we've watched the numbers over the time they competed at various levels, but when it all ended, WCW television really wasn't broken. It did $50 million in revenues for the year it died. And yes, the company lost, but TV wasn't the problem. Delivering at house shows and excessive contracts were. That's what killed that company. It wasn't TV. TV was performing. Its gross aggregate average made it a top, well, it was a number 11 in the time it was there. They were making a good living off of the TV. They just couldn't sustain the payroll they had, and then they were incompetent at house shows, and WCW suffered for that.
And pay-per-views at the end, too.
Oh, well, that all sort of flows together after a period of time. Once people get disinterested, everything dies and goes to hell in a handbasket. But one of the truths that existed, no matter how bad anybody's numbers got, no matter who was ahead, there have always been audiences that only watched the WWF. And always there were audiences that only watched WCW. And you notice that when the two run head-to-head. If WCW was doing a 3, when Raw started, it never lost more than a rating point. There was always that 2 rating point to 3 rating point that stuck around, and no matter how bad it got, because they were WCW watchers, which probably means history-wise they go back to Georgia Championship Wrestling. Vince made this mistake potentially one other time when he came in and he did the thing on WTBS originally.
In '84.
But all of a sudden, Mr. Wrestling 2 showed up as the only identity form, really. The wrestling fans went, screw you. We don't want this product. My fear, as they relaunched WCW, no matter what the window dressing they put on it with the talent that used to be at WCW, if it's not similar, if it doesn't look like what they remember, if it's couched in WWF look and attitude, it's not WCW. I don't see those fans coming back to that product, and at that point, what advantages are there going to be incrementally in terms of the rating you're trying to draw, particularly if the WWF is going to put WCW into existing time periods. The only advantage is if you can grow unique audience and get a higher number. Well, if all you're going to do is move WWF fans, you're not growing. You've got to find a way to get that 2 rating point that used to watch just WCW. That's the challenge. I'm not sure right now that they're addressing that challenge from what I've been hearing.
Right now, we're in an interesting situation with wrestling. Of course, with WWF, which basically owns the market, which means that there's, and it can be, historically, a very lucrative market, not just in television, but producing arena shows, although that's harder than it's probably been in a long, long time, and pay-per-view, which I think is also harder, although maybe it's just that the pay-per-view shows haven't been as good for the other organizations, and that's why it seems harder. I'm not sure. So there's people on the outside, the fringes that Vince doesn't want. Hulk Hogan. We hear about Randy Savage, Eric Bischoff, different people, Jerry Jarrett, thinking, there's a hole in the market for me.
That's the only one that has potential credibility because he knows what he's doing.
Okay. Now, when I hear about these guys saying, that they want to start something, I think because of television, especially the odds are pretty much against you unless, is it, I just keep thinking of all these people who, like WXO and AWF, who were going to use television syndication, and they go through so much money so fast that it just blinds you almost.
Well, yeah, and with all respect to the nice people that did those, they honestly didn't have a clue what they were doing on a variety of scales, but particularly on the television side. Alberstein did very pretty television for a 13-week period. I literally told people to take the money and pull my show off because I knew it couldn't survive, because there's a perception that some still have, and we even have this discussion at the National Wrestling Alliance in our lofty board meetings, where we talk about the potential of a singular national voice on television, like the NWA ever had one of them. But the reality is you can't have one show and succeed. That is impossible unless you control the budget and you build a business around it. WXO is a wonderful example. WXO came out and said, we're not going to do house shows for months. Well, there's a smart idea. We're going to go into an all-expense venture where we won't make revenue for 6 months. And how the hell do you survive that? And then all of a sudden they go into a second taping and they cancel it with a press release that says the bleachers didn't look good on television.
That sounds almost exactly like WOW.
Yeah, WOW.
Same thing, like $2.5 million in 2 months.
Yeah, they made a valiant effort in that they tried to do the full gambit. They got there, they did the pay-per-view, but they hotshotted it. It's like I've heard Mr. Bischoff say he wants to take the exciting Mat Rats concept to pay-per-view. Well, how the hell do you do that without promotion and a vehicle to do it? And that is the 8-ball everybody's behind. When various people were trying to or thinking of buying WCW, Jerry Jarrett was one of them, and I was talking to him at the time. The one thing that was key to that potential acquisition was the timetable. Was the time periods that the wrestling was in, the diversity of distribution, and the ability to turnkey that. When that was pulled off the table, WCW, the name brand alone, didn't mean enough to jump into that. It wasn't worth buying. And that's the key, is to try to figure out, you can go in one time period, but you've got to have a bigger business. If the Universal thing that Hogan is supposedly setting up with Jimmy Hart and others were to promote a theme park that had something to do with wrestling, and the show was a commercial to promote people to it because that's the ancillary revenue, then there's a chance it could work, because then the business isn't traditional wrestling. You're really out of the wrestling business. You're just playing around it. But if you're going to go play by the wrestling rules, where WWF is up on Madison Avenue with a gross aggregate average across, 8, maybe 9 shows. I've lost count at this point because of how they break the shows down by hour. But they're all cumed together. And at a GAA, it's as high lately even as a 13, 14. And as an average, it's still a top 10 program, which makes it viable. Well, if I go out with my little piece of shit single show, like I've got, we've got a great show, wonderful talent, exceptionally talented people. Steve Prazak with us. We've had everybody sitting in, everybody and their mothers come visit us. But we're still, we're small. And I can't go to Madison Avenue with 40% of the country and have any credibility at all. They're going to beat me up. There's no way to do that. And ECW suffered from that. They had their show bought on the air, so they had tons of expense in their syndication side because, in theory, they're going to make it back promoting, but that never worked. Then they added the albatross of a cable time period that fragmented everything they were doing, and most particularly the pay-per-view that it was almost working. And the two pieces together didn't add up to shit. So they were screwed. They were going to Madison Avenue with a 1 to a 1.5 cume rating. Well, you know, you're not even in the ballpark of the worst weekly action hour at that point. So your commercial value is going to be $2,500 a 30 if you're lucky. And that's if you can sell it. And that's what kills everybody. You've got to find a way to escape the pitfalls of that business. And that means you've got to have a plan to run buildings that makes sense, which means smaller rather than larger. TV's got to be a promotional vehicle where you count on at least breaking even, but don't look at it as the moneymaker. And you've got to control salaries and deal with people reasonably. I mean, if you're going to give a bucket load of money, I mean, I had Tank Abbott with me at one point working in the development system at Wildside, and here's a guy that was making up, you know, multiple hundreds of thousands in the upper end who didn't want to wrestle. And yet somebody was stupid enough to give this guy a contract. He's a nice guy, but he doesn't want to be a pro wrestler. What idiot gives somebody a $700,000 contract?
And a no-cut contract.
Yeah, I mean, fuck, he's still getting paid.
I know.
You know, and I don't blame him. I'd sit there and take it if I were, you know, staying home.
I would have signed it if I was
staying
him.
home with your wife and get paid. Somebody was stupid enough to open a checkbook and think that's booking, and it isn't.
No, you know, as far as using like TV for commercial purpose and that sort of thing, I also see a lot of indie groups that have a little tiny TV show, and the way that they pay for it is they use it as a commercial for their wrestling school.
Yeah, and that can be very sleazy because then you have a tendency to be, you know, charging a large amount of money for people that are never going to get anywhere. You know, for example, I won't let our guys do that. We actually have to deliver something. We just can't do that. I don't feel good when I see people that have no reason to be in a building out paying us money. You know, I'm sure once or twice it's happened. You know, we've fallen off the wagon, so to speak. But in general, we don't suffer from that problem as much. But it is a problem, and the wrestling school isn't going to be enough. There's not that many idiots at $1,500 a crack that are going to come in, you know, to bounce off the ring a few times. So you've got to have a bigger business built. You've got to go out and, if you're going to do your show to promote your house shows and to really make money, you've got to do all the pieces. You've got to go get advertisers involved. You've got to do site signage. You've got to control your costs. You've got to spend hundreds, not thousands. Don't worry about how much shit you're blowing up. Don't worry about the smoke on the entranceway. Work on the quality in the ring and frame it. And if people bitch at you because it doesn't look like the WWF, go, yeah, okay, sure, it isn't. We can't afford to be the fucking WWF. We're going to be what we can be. You know, I tire endlessly of being criticized or anybody being criticized for the quality. I once had somebody criticize my show by saying the Ohio Valley graphics were cutting edge compared to mine. which if you've seen the Ohio Valley graphics, is really a nice insult. Yeah. Good news is we have a new graphics generator, so eat that, Cornette. But the reality is, what's the fucking point? I mean, what we really should be showing are talented athletes in the ring, trying to tell good stories and trying to draw a loyal crowd, and then realizing the opportunity presented by that. If you're doing anything else, it's driven either by greed or ego.
Now, I got a question. What do you think long term, as far as, I guess actually two questions. One is, I look at TV cable ratings as far as these various networks. And almost all of them are down from last year. And the one that isn't down is TNN because of Raw. You know, it's way up, and it's, if you take Raw out of the mix, it's probably exactly where it was last year. But it makes it look like they've doubled their ratings because Raw is so powerful a vehicle. Now, being that one show, Raw, has such an impact, and granted, nobody else is going to be Raw, but you've got all of these cable net stations out there struggling for very small audience increases. How come nobody wants wrestling, which, if nothing else, as far as a fringe niche thing, it may not be powerful enough for a network, it may not be powerful enough for syndication in prime time as compared to, Seinfeld or Friends, but as far as on, one of these networks like TNN, why would TNN not want another show as opposed to giving them an existing show? And why would some of these other networks, like, say, a Fox Sports Net or something like that, not want wrestling, which will deliver, theoretically, or, a better audience, historically, than 98% of the stuff that they already have on?
There's a variety of answers. My personal opinion is It's a progression of the people who have grown up and are now at these stations or networks making decisions and what they learned in the process. I mean, Vince did a very good job of making everyone look like low rent compared to what he was doing, like the second tier. Nobody really wants to have the second tier. In addition, no wrestling has really been managed effectively by a leveraged syndicator, other than when Time Warner or Turner before that had WCW. So everybody else was already behind the eight ball because they had to fight to get on rather than a who loves you getting on the air. They had to fight like Vince did. The problem was he already held all the cards. There was nobody else to bribe. He had already done it. So you were sort of screwed. You were trying to go in and fix problems. You know, ECW, for example, fixed the time period, took it from a .3 to a .7. Congratulations, you still lose a bucket on that. But, you know, they did a good job. I mean, but the reality was it wasn't a job that was going to get them any money. And it wasn't going to keep them around for any period of time. Again, the system is set up to beat you, and Vince has both, and he's actually almost hurting himself now by the way he's built the product, because he's going to suffer from that in his potential relaunch of WCW. They are a secondary brand. Few people want the secondary brand. What you want to always couch what you're bringing is as new, unique, exciting, better, different, wonderful. If you're couching it as more of the same or as good as, you're going to have trouble getting real players to get involved. Because they all are knee-jerk and they will follow genres. Everybody will clear 800 court shows because they're out there. We'll all get on top of talk because it's out there. Now we're doing relationship or we're doing other stuff. You know, as an industry, we're good at that. We'll do replication, but we won't put it into any serious time periods, and we won't take it from people who aren't leveraged, who we need to get other shit from. And wrestling is never leveraged. You don't see Columbia TriStar going out with wrestling.
Okay, but now just an example, an ESPN2 or even ESPN1 will air minor league versions of Major League Sports.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But ESPN long ago decided wrestling was not a sport.
Yeah.
And not something they wanted. They had a bad period of time, and they felt they were burnt in the process, and they've never been inclined to come back unless somebody pays them for the privilege and does it on the second tier. You know, Fox is the same way, even though they had more success in their fleeting involvement. You know, they've always wanted to be paid. Every discussion with any Fox entity is put us up. Yes, we'd love it on the sports channels. Put it on Monday through Friday and pay us for the privilege, and go bankrupt in the process.
Bill, we're going to go take a break.
They're all willing to put it on. Everybody's willing to put wrestling on. That is not the problem. It's how they want it to go on that is.
We got a bunch of calls, and we're going to get to them right now. Wes, you're first up.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Very good.
Hey.
I wanted to ask Bill in regards specifically about NWA Wildside. I've seen a promotion, and it's good stuff. And why did WCW back when they were under Time Warner pull the developmental deal? And what happened with Sam Greco and Bob Sapp?
Good questions. Actually, WCW pulled the deal consistent with their pending sale. Literally, the day they had the meeting with personnel to announce that they were pretty much throwing it all out and selling out was our last day. They simply gave us notice 30 days prior to that because they had already pre-established the date fairly well going into it. They had some vagueness in it, but in case some of the other deals had come down, but they had already established sort of a drop dead just in terms of how much more money they were willing to lose at the time in terms of going forward. So we pretty much weren't eliminated for anything we did, but rather as a product of saving costs. And the way the deal was set up, good or bad, they were actually spending a lot of money because Terry Taylor's vision of the deal was to include the young talent that was also on television in addition to the talent that hadn't made it there. And some of those people had deals where they were paid per appearance in addition to their salary. So all of a sudden, if I have Jindrak, O'Hare, Palumbo, and Stasiak on a card, and let's say they're getting $500 an appearance, in addition to the trans and other stuff necessary, all of a sudden, beyond the little bit I'm being paid, they've got an additional $2,000 a night booking fee on them to pay those guys. I think in 1 week I was told that they had a $12,000 payroll on what we were doing alone. So it became a cost they had to get rid of to get everything in line. Bob Sapp, I'm not sure where the beast is. Last I saw him, he came to a couple of shows. Always had a good attitude, always was fun to be around, but I have no idea what's happened to him. Sam Greco had left us prior to the end of the deal because he had been identified to take the role as a wrestler in an action film in Australia for a major studio. And I believe that's what he's still working on.
Yeah, yeah. You know, were you surprised when TNT and TBS, you know, when Jamie Kellner made the decree that he was canceling wrestling effectively, basically ending the era? And also, in hindsight, do you believe that that decision was more the only way to sell to Vince as opposed to a decision made based on the fact that they really didn't want wrestling anymore? It was just like, you know, if they were going to sell to somebody else, they had to keep wrestling, but they wanted to sell to Vince, and it was just the only way to make that deal go through.
Well, it must have been because there was an extremely viable offer from Jerry Jarrett to buy the company, and they did not take that offer that was on the table. Times that people were assumed to be on vacation and other stuff. They were actually in negotiations with Jerry, and I was privy to those with some other people. And but our key on the potential of involvement would have been television. Jerry Jarrett is very smart and has a great rule as it relates to wrestling, which is he's determined not to lose money, and he never has. And that's the thing that makes him the only viable person to get back in. Everybody else is, with all apologies to all of them, because some are very talented performers, but they're pissing in the wind. And they're going, you know, Hogan's thing, for example, is talking about doing a pilot. That is mistake number 101 in television. You never do pilots. You tell them how wonderful it's going to be and resist any temptation to spend that money. No one, the only pilots that are done are at the network level, and that's because it's sort of a grandfathered thing. They've done the pilot process. But in syndication, you show them as little as possible, probably a 3-minute tape. And that's what everybody should be doing. You know, show them the stars, don't show them what you're doing, or somebody's going to try to help you produce your show and you're screwed. So everybody going in that says, I'm going to do a pilot and go to the networks, as a given, they have no chance in hell.
Now, just a quick question about WCW, because you were talking about this earlier, how in order for this thing to be a success, they have to get back that segment of the audience that only watched WCW. And you were talking about how
where do you find
the new company has to be similar to the old one. And my question is, how similar does it have to be? Does it have to be the same names, like Ric Flair and Goldberg? Does it have to be like the Southern style?
Yeah, well, you have to start with enough continuity that people think it's the product. And then if you want to try to fix it, you know, who knows if that's going to work? That's a whole separate conversation and argument. And that happens during the process, because until you do it, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But the realities are that there was a substantial rating that liked, at various levels, WCW.
I would say more.
They liked it.
I would say more hadn't been driven off yet, because there was a lot of people who I think really liked it a few years earlier.
I would agree with that, but they exclusively had not been driven off. And once the product went away, that audience did not jump over to the competitor, or the competitor wouldn't be constantly losing numbers.
The competitor's losing his core audience, and never gained their audience either.
Because there's no spark, there's no competition in the process. And that's the key of the relaunch, is not to artificially do it. This can't be the NWO internal gimmick. You've got to create what looks to be an autonomous company, and you've got to find a way financially to make it work. Fortunately, they haven't yet, to the best of my knowledge, tossed a bucket load of money at anybody, so they haven't made mistake one like another major industry figure did. But, you know, I don't know whether they can take it where they need to go, because until we see their vision, you know, if the idea is to move Kurt Angle over and, you know, have back and forth, and that, my personal opinion is that's a mistake. I think they need to distinguish the product, establish it on its own, and then if they want to create something down the line, like, what the fuck is this upstart doing messing with our time? It's taken away our time from the from the WWF side, that's fine. But to come in and immediately try to jumpstart a feud and try to reclaim the audience in that, I think that's going to have the same hotshot success the XFL did. You may draw them the first time if you put the fireworks display up nicely, but after you've seen the fireworks one time, it's the same damn show.
Now, do you think
Anything else,
throwing
Wes?
$6 million at Goldberg would be throwing money away?
Yes. I don't think Goldberg will draw that for damn sure. I think Goldberg could be a good single one or two payoffs to draw a hotshot crowd, but there better be something underneath to keep him around. Goldberg's been off for so long, there'd be interest in seeing him back, but I don't think there's a lot of mileage there. Unless he's been in the ring regularly, and I know he hasn't been.
No, but the one thing is that there's the marquee value of Goldberg Austin if it really hits big on pay-per-view.
Well, you addressed that in an early one. There's all sorts of early matches you could do. You can do the champion stuff, but then you're falling into Bischoff mentality, which is going to be a short-term hotshot that's eventually going to kill you. You're going to all of a sudden be buying your rating, and eventually you're going to end up booking rap stars.
Hey, Wes, is there anything else?
Yeah, just one more. In regards to just when I grew up with the NWA and they had the heavyweight champion would tour around, how does that envision that there's still Howard Brody has, that there's going to be one NWA champion and they'd go to different territories, or how do you think that's been handled?
That's not Howard's decision. We actually have a board of directors, and Howard is part of that as our esteemed president. I get to be one of the lofty vice presidents, and Jim Miller, God bless him, gets to be the other. Yes, we do have a touring champion. His name is Steve Carino. He is moving around. He's got 4 or 5 dates up in the Pacific Northwest for ECCW. He's going into Texas, facing Kevin Northcutt very soon. He just came out of Florida not that long ago. Are we able to keep him as busy as we'd like to? The answer, regrettably, is no, because good or bad, we're still our little clusterfuck of promoters. And this is not the 1970s, and none of us are making hundreds of thousands promoting gates that exceed 5,000. We're all either, some of us are hotshot promoters that, put Tom Brady in the main event in 3 different roles, and others of us are trying to run as regularly as possible because we believe in the circuit system. And at least, if they're doing what I'd like, we're running once a week, and certainly that's not all of our people. So we're not keeping Steve busy. We didn't keep Mike Rapata busy. We didn't keep Ogawa busy. We didn't keep Gary Steele busy. We didn't keep Danny Severn busy, and they had to do other stuff. But I think, and it has to be a slowly but surely process, we're doing the best we can by relatively the same rules the NWA existed before, which is we're a little group of promoters. We agree, and then we're all out for ourselves in the long run, which is the way it's always been. And we'll share the talent, and we'll do the best we can to get people booked. I mean, I have the world champions going around. I have the new heavenly bodies, the NWA World Tag Team Champions, coming up in late July, and they're starting to travel more. We've got a little junior tournament going on in Florida coming up that will expose some more of the talent. There's no quick way to do it because we don't have one great national voice with the layers necessary. But we're doing, I think, as good as you can given the independent system and the realities of the system. And if you add together the cumulative gates and the impressions that our individual members get, which, by the way, does include Victor Canonis, Antonio Inoki, and Ohio Valley, we are drawing some reasonable houses, and people are getting the NWA name out, at least in fits and spurts. So it's not the same as it was, but we're getting there, and hopefully we'll keep Steve busier than he has been, but he's been a good champion so far, if not a great champion.
Is there like an eventual goal that the NWA has for where they'd like to be in the future?
Well, if you asked every one of the promoters, it would be different because there's always 2 priorities. There's the company and them. Because everybody wants their thing bigger than everybody else's, and yes, we'd also like the company to grow. We're not owned by a single entity. We're a limited liability corporation with 20-plus members who each own a piece of the pie and who all want to be the guy at some level. So there's, the usual petty jealousies and fun stuff that occurs in any happy family like that. What's our goal? Our goal is to be bigger. Our goal is to have the NWA name recognized, ideally at the level it was before, although that's probably not possible, but at least respected. And, in my tenure with the company, I was approached first with Cornette back when we didn't join, but we did get Danny Severn in back in the Smoky Mountain time. Then Corny, they set the deal up at the WWF, and I was approached, and then Corny said, yeah, now is the time. So I joined. I think that from that 3-year-ago period, there's been dramatic improvement of the overall perception of the NWA as a name brand. because it relatively didn't exist before that much. You know, it was something that ECW threw into a garbage can. And hopefully we're getting beyond that and we're moving forward. We've got matches set up for one of Inoki's companies with Carino and Rapata going over to work Otani and I forget the other guy. But, I mean, I think that's going to be good. Internationally, that's a good thing. You know, we do have international members. We have 2 strong Canadian members. We've got Victor. I mean, everybody doesn't jump on board as aggressively as we liked, but slowly but surely we're getting there. Where will we end up? You know, who knows, because we're actually not playing with the real rules, which is, you know, in terms of being a singular national force. If we're lucky and I get my way, each of our members will become important where they are. And by that strength, city to city or region to region, will be considered larger than we are today. That's, I think, the primary accomplishment we can hope for.
And let's go to Jason in Georgia. Jason, what's going on?
Dave, Bryan.
Hey,
how's it going?
Good.
Good. Hey, before I start, can we plug the Observer Live chat room?
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say hello to everybody. Hey, there's an argument right now about what's going to be talked about next. If it's going to be the Dudley dog or dong, or the dreaded F word for today.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, Bill Behrens.
Yes.
I had heard talk about Roland Alexander was talking about maybe bringing in AJ Styles a couple weeks ago on Dave.
Yeah, and in fact, AJ had told me he was talking to him, and at least based on the internet, because I haven't called Alan today, it appears he's booked for that King of the Indie thing. And then we've got Air Paris and Jimmy Rave going down for Howard Brody's Junior 12 or whatever the hell he's calling that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're trying to get. Part of the gimmick I do is because I'm known notoriously. I again learned from Jerry Jarrett. We're not known as a great payday. We're known for exposure and hopefully helping the other guys move around. And perhaps those are examples that we're accomplishing that. You know, fortunately our guys are being requested by other promoters and getting reasonable payoffs for that. And I think that's great. And AJ's beyond talented, and he'll do a wonderful job there.
Yeah, how long do you think? I mean, he's in the same boat as all the other?
He should already be signed at this point. It's a shame he's not. I think his problem was he and Air Paris both. Is that they got there at the end. I don't know how that explains Easy Money Jason Jett getting signed, Jason Broles, but he's a good kid too, and he deserves it. But these kids just did exceptional work on television and should have been brought in with the rest of that crew. There's still continuing interest. They keep calling. AJ is booked for the WWF when they come to Atlanta on the 9th. So I think there are some opportunities for these kids.
Hey, since there are so many close promotions nearby, is there any chance Wildside will be working with Dusty's group or more with the Florida group or any of the groups in Tennessee?
Well, we work with all the NWA groups all the time and the Tennessee groups. As long as Bert Prentice has a company, I'll always work with him off and on and provide talent. He saved my ass when USWA went away by creating Music City Wrestling with me when I needed a television product, so I'll always owe him at some level, and he's an exceptional promoter. And I work with Mike Porter also in that area, which is, you know, interesting and somewhat confusing, but always works. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart.
I never can figure out Nashville.
Never try.
I know. I stopped a long time ago.
It's based on whim alone.
I mean, when Bert did like his 14th retirement and then came back, it was like, okay, I'm just not going to think about Nashville ever again.
Well, it's actually Nashville's one of the more entertaining places to watch because when Bert's on, it's extremely compelling, and then it will go through these dark periods where you want to throw darts at it. But you mentioned Dusty Rhodes' Turnbuckle Entertainment. We actually did our best to cooperate and still do with Dusty. Jorge Estrada, who now works with Dusty, started with us. We had Luther Biggs and Ron Studd were with us, and we put over that they were from Turnbuckle at the time. I've offered to sanction Dusty's cards, in fact, as NWA. Dusty has very specific ways he wants to do things and specific ways he wants to accomplish them, and for whatever reason, my offer, which has not included any money, has not been what he would prefer to do. Exactly why? I don't know. but it's no problem. I can coexist with Dusty with no problem. He provides a dramatically different product than I do. I doubt I will ever have Larry Zbyszko versus Dusty Rhodes as a main event, although it certainly sounds interesting. As it relates to the other promotions, we work all the time. I've got kids coming in from NWA Southwest. I just had a group coming in from NWA Virginia for the last TV. I've got the Heavenly Bodies coming up for 3 dates in July. I've got a group coming down from Maine. Our goal with our television is to present an open door, and it's just the difficulty is getting everybody on. I've got a show called Freedom Fight coming up on the 30th at the arena with literally over 50 people booked.
Wow.
On good or bad, our locker room is very full and includes some extremely talented people. David Flair, for example, is back with us now that he's free because he wants to get back in the ring, and he's hoping that that brief mention by Jim Ross is true, and if he'd only called.
How is he doing, by the way? We got some reports saying he was looking better, but, how do you...
David Flair
he wasn't exactly looking great before, so...
Well, the biggest shame is that we're not more widely distributed and more people haven't seen how good David Flair's gotten. David Flair came to us just badly beat up. He was told he had to be his dad. And nobody should ever be that when your dad has a high profile. You should never be told that. That's the worst
Especially
thing to
Ric
have
Flair.
to do to somebody.
Oh, God.
And he literally, when his first 2 matches, would come to the back and whip himself. And it was just terrible to watch. And we finally, I spent a lot of time, and we talked him down. And the difference now is that David Flair has found a group of people he enjoys being around. He goes to the ring, the crowd responds immediately to him. The Flair spots are now pop spots, and accordingly help him feel good, and that's opened him up to want to do more. So he's a Flair that throws a drop kick. He's a Flair that does a moonsault. And he also will flip over the ropes and hit the clothesline, and he'll slap the shit out of you. So, and he smiles the whole time, but when he's taking the heat, he knows what to do. He's learned it, and people don't know. David Flair is 6'3". He's 235 pounds now, and he's added 15 pounds of muscle to his upper body. This is a talented kid that can go somewhere if he's not pushed too fast. When The Rock, for example, came in as Flex Cavana to the WWF, they pushed him so fast he was booed out of the building. I see a lot of analogy to this kid, because he's no less talented, quite honestly.
Whoa.
And people just don't know it because he was never given the chance. He was thrown in the damn ring, and they thought Terry Funk could lead him. And, if anything, he was scared to death of the whole experience. This kid was treated so badly in the way it was done, and I don't know why it was done that way. But he was thrown in and told, here's what you have to do immediately. I know you've never bumped before, but you're now about to go out and be one of a guy who's considered by many as one of the best that's ever hit a ring. And you have to live up to that name. Oh, okay, you're not doing a good job at that, so we're now going to make you a fucking crazy man, and we're going to do some kind of stupid gimmick where Vince Russo will end up really being the father of your child. This kid was torn all over the place, and he's just genuinely a nice guy. He's a good kid. He listens. He learns. He wants to improve. I'll give you an example, and this is the honest-to-God truth. Although the show was moved, Burt Prentice offered this kid $500 an airplane ticket and a hotel room to come to a show on the 30th in Nashville. It's now been moved to the 14th, so it's not an issue. I called David and said, that's one offer. I said, or you can drive to the arena and I'll get you $40 gas money. Guess where he was going to come?
To your show.
Exactly. That's the kind of kid he is. He wants to keep learning, and he's serious about what he's doing. And he's also a Flair, so he's really good now because he's actually getting attractive women to come in and work some of our shows.
Anything else?
Yeah, Dave. Any chance of getting any lucha stars that speak English on the show?
For example,
Porky
Lobos.
do they?
Oh, God. No.
Well, Fabuloso Blondie's probably available.
One of the female headhunters.
Oh, Martha Villalobos. I don't know. Does she speak English? Well, I mean, I don't know if I would find. I don't know where to find her, for one thing.
What about Juventud Guerrera?
We've had him on before.
Right.
I got nothing against having him on. In fact, he'd be pretty interested. Pretty interesting right now.
Maybe when he comes back from Japan.
Yeah, well, he'll be back from Japan. The last show's Sunday, so. And he's always running around. God, Juventud Guerrera. He's very unreliable these days. Now that I think about it.
Didn't he just start back in Mexico?
He starts back in Mexico all the time. and then he's not there very long. So, but I personally like Juventud Guerrero a lot. So, yeah, well, I'll try to find him. If anyone knows where he's at when he comes back from Japan, let me know, because, yeah, I'd like to have him on again anyway.
You guys do a great job. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Scott in Connecticut.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
And, hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hello there.
First, I just wanted to say, you were commenting before about how not the way not to do this WCW thing is to rush into it by doing, interpromotional angles right away. And I totally agree, and I think, the first thing they've done wrong is having, DDP as this stalker. That's a main angle, and already you've got, Undertaker, who's considered a top guy in the WWF, and DDP, who's basically the biggest guy that they have under WCW contract, and now you have them feuding before WCW TV's even on. And I think they should wait a year at least of just constant WCW programming, and, WCW product being WCW product, not WCW product being WCW/WWF product,
You know what's funny of what you just said?
I think that was the plan for a while.
That was exactly what their...
I agree with him.
That was exactly what their plan was, and then Wyatt, and I don't know why it changed, but they just did a 180 about...
I think I know why it changed. TV.
Because TV ratings went down.
I think they were in panic because the numbers were dropping, and they were trying to find a way to artificially enhance from one week to the next. But that's
and they figured interpromotional. They figured interpromotional is a way to get the ratings back up. Yeah,
but I think the reality is, and you're right, first of all, again, we go back to what I said earlier. If you remember Raw and Nitro, there was an audience that was watching, and there was only one rating point that jumped when Nitro went from hour to hour over to Raw, on average. So let's take that the opposite way. There was this whole unique WWF audience that never knew what the fuck was going on over at WCW.
Exactly.
I was over at my godchild's house talking to a kid, and he ended up saying, he saw a Lawler for Mayor sign in my car, and I gave him one, and he started talking, and all of his questions were WWF, and I out of curiosity, I went, do you know who any of these people are? And I ran through everybody at the top of the old WCW. He knew Flair, but only Rick. He knew Hogan, but only really from the WWF mixover. Yeah. He knew Sting, and maybe one or two guys, Goldberg. Only the top, most visible pushes that were there. Otherwise...
all the ones who aren't coming,
there's something they weren't watching. And I think that's the end mistake. I think Page's appearance was a huge mistake because the audience he appeared in front doesn't really know who the fuck he is.
Well, I think people know who Page is, and I think that's
but they don't care about him.
But he got that huge pop and everything. And I think that's basically the only reason.
Well, that's a Pavlovian pop. He's brought out as a guest star. I swear, a monkey will get a Pavlovian pop if you bring him out that way.
Well, I'm pretty sure if Bossman took off the hood, then the crowd would.
They would.
Maybe not Bossman.
They would, but they would groan real quick afterwards.
But I'm pretty sure Golga would get the pop.
But I think that
no, not that one.
Putting Page in his main, interpromotional angles is a real mistake. I think that I know this is impossible for them to do now because they've already started the interpromotional angles, and I think they've started with Lance Storm, Hugh Morris, and Stacy Keibler. I cannot imagine any casual WWF fan who hasn't watched WCW for the past years knowing who any of these people are. So just by showing, the casual WWF fans, the first guy that comes out is Lance Storm, and of course, the pop was big because it was Calgary. But
and he kicks Perry Saturn, who's an insignificant guy on
their.
But
it's like the first guy they're seeing in this angle is someone they don't know.
Yeah, if we were doing this on the regional level, of course, we would build up the history between Storm and an existing player like Jericho and go it that way.
Well, I think they should hold off on that. I don't even think. I think maybe, a one-shot deal at a pay-per-view where all the WCW guys come out and, they announce all their information, like when they're going to be on TV, what the plan's going to be, whatever. But I don't think they should be, super kicking random guys, especially guys like Perry Saturn and Edge. And I don't think they should be doing that because I think for a year they should be two separate companies because right now I'm spelling NWO all over again.
Well, no, it won't be that good, unfortunately, because NWO worked. Good or bad, it worked. And this, I think, is going to have trouble working unless I'm missing something that they're not showing me.
And the only thing that could be is Goldberg. So,
Well, yeah, but that I still think that's a hot shot.
They have to book that right, too.
XFL. That's at one big number, and then it drops in the toilet.
They have to book Goldberg right too. I mean, they could bring in Goldberg, and if they do it the same way they're doing this, it'll sink too. I mean, they have to give Goldberg a year in WCW before they do anything with Austin.
If they bring him back, all of a sudden put him with Austin, and then have The Rock hit on it, it'll draw one good house.
Yeah, one, and then they'll go down from there, just like they've been doing since WrestleMania. But I had a couple more questions for actually all of you on this. What does it take for say a moderately successful independent promotion who's doing pretty well within the area, but only really tours that say like the Northeast region? What would it take for them to get a television program? What do they need as far as what kind of money do they need to be bringing in every couple months and stuff?
Are you talking a local program?
Yeah.
Well,
it probably depends on the size of the market.
In theory, I know that. There's two answers. There's what people think, and there's reality. I'm probably going to get all of my staff irritated right now, but we produce our show for hundreds of dollars. Mm-hmm. The word thousands scares me. That has far too many zeros for me to deal with. Anyone else that was doing the show we do, good or bad, would be spending thousands. Mm-hmm. When Dusty did his show, he did one taping, spent $35,000 to $50,000 on a show that never saw the light of day, except in home video, I'm assuming. If I had $35,000, I would be embarrassed to tell you how long I would be able to do my TV without having to go out of pocket again.
Yeah.
So the reality is anyone can do television if you understand that you don't have to be the World Wrestling Federation and duplicate those costs.
Yeah.
And if you find a way to do it that works. And we've done that. I mean, we use 3 cameras, but I won't out the cameras. Mm-hmm. But they're definitely not necessarily the big time. Now, would I love to have $20,000 cameras? Hell yeah. Mm-hmm. And if somebody wants to ship me the money, I'll get them. But until then, I'm going to work on making it look as good as possible with what we got. I grew up watching, and I still think there's an audience for it, USWA at its most compelling for me, or CWA actually before that, was when they took the single overhead camera shot down on the ring, and you guys who watched that will remember, and showed me matches from the Mid-South Coliseum. And all of a sudden, Lord Humongous would be beating the fuck out of Jerry Lawler. And all you had was that one camera. And it wasn't even that good a camera. It was Randy West doing the best he could up there. And the end result was it gave you something that you normally would have to pay a ticket for, and that's the thing that frequently we don't do for our audience. And that's what we got to remember. You don't have to give them everything on TV. It's just there's a perception you do, and then ego gets involved, and people are concerned that their stuff doesn't look as good as the best that's out there. What doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Provide product and make sure that the talent you're utilizing is good. Or if you're just going to be local and you're trying to draw a house, do the best damn commercial you can to get people into that door, because that's what's going to make you money, not the TV.
Yeah, definitely. And Dave and Bryan, you guys are on the other side of the country, so you guys probably maybe aren't at a position to say this, but I mean, who would you say right now up in the Northeast is at the closest to being able to put something together on TV?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
I have no idea. I don't think there's anybody up in this area.
Just to throw a name out, the company that runs the Elks Lodge, right? UCW, right? And that's the company that
I've heard of them.
Yeah, you never heard of them?
No, I've heard of.
Okay, yeah. And they basically bring in a bunch of ECW guys and stuff like that.
Right.
But I mean, they have Low-Key and Red and Maximo, Mikey's guys. So then, I mean, they run basically a show every 1 to 2 months, which I mean isn't good for having a television show, because I mean it's you're not. I don't think that would be able to. You wouldn't be bringing in enough money as far as events.
Well, actually, that's actually not a terrible idea if you take a step back. That's how ECW survived for going on 4 years. They didn't do more than 1 show a month either. They did 1 taping at the bingo hall and got all their TV out of that, and then people bought the shows eventually, but Paul wasn't promoting that much. So, believe me, that's not a bad way to go if you can get the product out there.
So I remember ECW towards the end, basically last year, they set up, this string of shows that they'd always want to guarantee as TV tapings, especially up in New York, like they'd run Poughkeepsie or Danbury, and they wanted to be a TV taping, but then they'd stop by the arena and they'd have to make that a TV taping. So they ended up putting 1 to 2 matches from each show on like TV for the week, and then like some of them would make syndicated, some of them would make TNN. It got really confusing, and like none of the stuff really meshed well on ECW TV as far as building up angles. And I think you're right that you know, it was better just to do the one big arena show and use it for 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, I mean, that worked at the beginning. Part of the problem with ECW is it aspired to be big.
Yeah.
Without continuing the perception of being big that was working for them. Paul just decided at one point with Steve Carroll and the other guys, let's be big. And believe me, the hardest thing to do is be big and make it work. You've got to have a bucket load of money to cover your ass on the lean times. And when you don't have that bucket load of money, you're caught against the payment process of the people you work with. You've told your talent you're going to pay them today, but you've got a pay-per-view provider that's paying you in 4 months.
Well,
so
I think that,
all of a sudden you're basically fucked, and no matter what you do, you're going to constantly be, trying desperately to make it even. ECW made the mistake of trying to become too big. If they had stayed small and tossed their pay-per-view in, which we're doing adequately, they'd probably still be around.
Well, I mean, I think the whole reason that a lot of the ECW fans were generally older fans who basically gave up on suspending their disbelief, and they were just going out there cheering all the blood and stuff like that. I think they liked that it wasn't a big WWF promotion. I think they liked that you're in this small arena and you get a good shot at looking at the action and stuff like that. Whereas
but the one thing that they didn't like was that as soon as there was a star, that star would leave, and they would turn on that star. And the problem is that Paul then, because of that, wanted to keep those stars, which meant he had to pay them, and that's where he got screwed, was paying people enough for them not to leave.
Again, that's the problem of attempting to be big.
Well, back to my example of ECW really quick is that they do the shows once or twice every 2 months and stuff like that, and they produce the videos that they sell, right? And I have a couple of as far as the graphics through the transitions and stuff like that, and basically like with the names on the bottom at the entrance and the opening montage they have and stuff like that, it's pretty decent quality. I'd say it's up there with almost Ohio
OVW?
Valley.
Ohio Valley?
Yeah. So
that is the standard, by the way.
And so it's almost it's a little I guess maybe because it's probably a second generation tape, it looks a little foggy or whatever, but it's still pretty good as far as that. So I mean obviously they have the equipment and stuff like that, and I've noticed the cameras they have are pretty professional. I mean they're not $20,000 cameras, but they're pretty good, and I know they actually have they're not doing the work themselves. They have a company doing the shooting for them.
Oh, they're in trouble already?
So, I mean, they have, and I'm looking at these videos, and they're pretty good, and I'm thinking, if they have enough money, or they're bringing enough money to do this for a video, which, I mean, I wouldn't imagine gives you that much income, why don't they do it and try to put it on TV? And that's why I was interested in knowing, what's missing, I guess.
I think Bill's idea is that they probably don't have enough to afford that right now. It's not like they're bringing enough from the shows to afford these expensive, paying someone else to do it and everything like that, and probably using money that they don't have right now.
Well, and it appears, without knowing the promotion very well, though reading about it, that with a lot of good luck to all of them, that they're doing the TV for reasons that don't have a lot to do with making money on the house shows per se, because the only reason to do television is to draw a house. Otherwise, or to provide the perception that your people are stars if you know how to do that, but that requires you getting on for nothing.
Well, the thing is, they run the same building every show up until now because they're outside.
Well, then with all apologies, potentially the television show is probably a vanity vehicle for them if they were to do it, because they have to find. Otherwise, there's no reason to do the television show, because if you're doing it for home video, you're going to make hundreds. I mean, that's pretty much a reality.
But the question is, if we're talking the New York market, that's got to be the most expensive market in the country to get on television, just to get on a station, wouldn't it?
Well, licensing alone is a bitch.
So, one more quick opinion on, if you guys give me, Brian and Dave, is that, would you recommend doing the subscription plan for the OVW TV?
Yes.
If you like OVW, yeah. Sure. You want to see more wrestling, and you want to see...
Corny does a very good job, and he's got some very talented kids down there that will probably show up in the World Wrestling Federation whether you want them to or not.
Yeah, I know that. I'm a fan of the product. It's just that I'm worried about, will I be interested in it 2 weeks after it's occurred, And
I don't see any reason why not. I don't see any reason why not.
I mean, that doesn't matter.
You don't know it's 2 weeks late anyway because you're just getting the tape,
Yeah. So I mean,
and you're not going to the house shows yourself, so it's not like it's going to be out of order for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what is it? It's about 2 weeks for.
Yeah.
And
It's
how much-
every 4 weeks you get a
Every
tape.
4 weeks.
If
and
you
get the
like
4 shows?
a Southern-style hard sell with Corny as the primary driver and some decent-looking bodies and a few guys that actually know what they're doing in the mix,
Well, I love Cornette's book.
it's not a bad promotion at all, and Corny's doing a wonderful job by, trading off the guys that know what they're doing with the guys that don't.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got Kurt Angle's brother there, and he is as much an opposite of Kurt as there could be in the world in terms of his ability to get over.
I mean, but is it worth getting it? So far after it's actually,
Yes.
I don't see any reason why not. If you enjoy it, I mean, I get all my Japanese tapes are a week to 3 weeks later, but it doesn't make a difference to me because no one else is seeing them any quicker either.
All right, cool. Yeah.
The timeliness of watching the good product is it doesn't matter. I mean, I would encourage anybody
Or
who
the
wants
bad
to watch
product.
Wildside to order the tapes for the same reason. I mean, the fact that the storylines aren't the day you watch them. I mean, the reality is it's only now with satellite and the perception that everything has to be there today that this happened. In the old days, the same damn show traveled around a circuit over as much as a 2-week period. So, I mean, shows were dated as a given if you were running a circuit. And in theory, those people I work with and myself, we have the same mentality. I don't mind that it's 2 weeks old. It doesn't matter.
Did York and Matthews get released?
I believe so. Yes.
They did.
They did.
Everybody but Rod Rages supposedly got released.
No, they're keeping Victoria, Victoria, Lance Cade. I had the names earlier. Island Boys.
Yeah, but unfortunately, and that's a shame because Joey and Christian are exceptionally talented and great young people.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask: what do you think as far as viability of an attempt to syndicate either a Mat Rats to build for a pay-per-view as something other than traditional wrestling programming, or say an Ultimate Fight television show? Let's say the UFC would produce a television show as a way to build stars for a pay-per-view, kind of in the old way that professional wrestling did the same thing.
It's very possible, but everybody who tries it goes into it the wrong way because they go in and have to live with the rules they're provided. You basically have to go in and understand that you have a limited budget and you have certain things you want to accomplish. If you want to draw incremental dollars at a pay-per-view, you need to figure out what the number is that you can afford to spend to get there. And then the TV is literally a commercial. Wrestling has always been a commercial. It always will be. It's a commercial for other
people don't.
related
You know
products.
what you just said. What you just said is something that people don't understand. A lot of times when we talk about Raw, Bryan and I will go, "That was an entertaining show," but we understand that its purpose is not to just entertain you for 2 hours and then not spend money. It's to also get you to want to see a certain match, want to buy a certain match, and if it doesn't accomplish that, it's missing one of its prime objectives.
Well, and it's to develop the stars that you can merchandise, to develop the back end of the video library.
Well, to spend money.
To do, if you're doing a business, then the business has legs to it. It's a hydra. It has more than one head. And that's what most people who start up television don't get, is that they go at it from a totally ego standpoint. I want my ass on TV. And, so all of a sudden we see some fat guy doing ring announcing. And that's the bulk of the indie shows. It's a bunch of idiots putting together television that may or may not involve talented wrestlers. Because, God bless them, wrestlers will take money wherever it comes from. But that doesn't get you to where you need to be.
I mean, that was one of Vince Russo's biggest problems was when he wrote TV, he was writing TV to entertain himself and, I guess he figured, the people as well. And if he ever did an angle that was to build up a match, it was never a match that people would have to pay to see. He was building up matches that people would see for free on TV.
Yeah, and it was a crucial mistake. I mean, I often analogize when I talk about it. We actually, with our Wildside show, provide an awful lot of wrestling. We actually allow people to see a lot more than if we were promoting for that house show we would. On a local level, we would never do that. We would show less, which is what we do. But I flash over to Bert over in Nashville, or anybody who's a good promoter. The more you give away on TV, the less you're going to draw at the house. So you don't want to give them that main event. You don't want to give away all of the major angles. You want to tease everything, set up the major angle for the house show, because that's going to be your primary revenue historically in wrestling. Television's there But unless you control the revenues on it and have all the mechanisms we talked about starting at the beginning, cable, syndication, a big enough number to sell it on Madison Avenue, you're pissing in the wind anyway. So your key is to promote to where you can make the money. Merchandising, house shows, potentially pay-per-view. But you can't jump into one without the rest of the pieces.
Let's go to Mark in Los Angeles. Mark, what's going on?
How you guys doing today, Dave?
Doing really good.
First off, is there a subscription system for NWA Wildside like there is for OVW?
Not subscription, but you can buy our videos. Go to nwa-wildside.com, and you'll see in the video, just go to merchandise, you'll see a breakdown of videos. It's relatively inexpensive, and we pay for shipping because, honestly, we want to get the product out there. So check out, but all of our TV shows and most of our house shows are available.
Dave, this was the best show you guys have had. You guys, I hope when you finish the show, you guys rebook him for like next month. But
Cool.
My question is, do you think the UPW is really being dropped as a developmental territory? I've read that on One Wrestling today.
Yes and no. Rick Bassman is being dropped from contract. I don't know that. As far as any other changes, they're going to still, work with them. But as far as I don't know that they ever really were a developmental thing other than Rick Bassman was under contract.
Well, Rick's deal was totally different from everybody else's in that his was totally a back-end deal anyway. He
was being paid salary, and he's now got. He was paid salary, but he's still got the back-end deal, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, he was never really part of the normal development system. And
no, yeah, right, exactly. It wasn't his company was not a developmental company like Cornette's anyway, right?
Totally different. Yeah, his deal was different. The relationship was totally different, and will probably continue to be.
Yeah. So I mean, so it's like yes and no is the answer to that question, I guess.
And that is right.
Okay, That's all I got. I'll let somebody else come on.
Okay, we're going to go to Abby. Abby, what's up?
Hey, how are you guys? I have to agree with the last caller. You were probably the most entertaining guest I've heard in a really long time, and I think it's because of the background that you're bringing, to the listeners.
Oh,
but,
thank you.
Really quick, I think that the DDP thing, in terms of its shock value, was what. I mean, I guess hearing the mixed reaction from people that it should have been somebody different. The only other person that came to my mind that would have been a logical suspect would have been like Shawn Michaels or something coming back.
Yeah, but that's not viable.
Boss man, I probably would have groaned and turned off the TV and gone to bed.
That's the problem with surprises is that people in wrestling love to swerve and give you surprises, but they're not as good at paying off.
I would have.
And it's hard to pay off.
I would have actually promoted the surprise, and that was, I think, a mistake.
Right.
And the funny thing about surprises is like 95% of the time they're horrible, but fans, whenever they hear there's going to be a surprise, their expectations still go through the roof. I don't know why that is.
In fact, I saw that on my report, I think on the Observer thing, that I had the requisite mystery partner at an upcoming card.
Well, the other thing I was thinking, too, though, is that if you had to pick a logical person to pull from WCW to rush into something to try to sell the pay-per-view, he kind of makes sense because he is kind of up there in age, and to put him up against The Undertaker, who's also kind of up there and been around.
Oh, Dallas is youthful.
I think that it's a program that's good for DDP to start with, and if Undertaker really is nearing the end of his career, to sort of go out with. But I'll let you.
But if you look at it of the list of guys from WCW that they have, and for the role that they have, he was the best guy.
He wasn't, but I could see.
No, he was. I mean, as far as like of the list of guys that they could have brought in, unless they, I mean, the only guy I was thinking of, the best guy that would have popped everything, but except it couldn't viably be done, except it would have gotten a great pop, is Jake Roberts, because it would have fit everything that everybody wanted, except he was going to come in and look 100 years old, so you can't do it. But aside from that, DDP, at least, I mean, it's not the greatest.
But it's something we've never seen before either.
Yeah, well, they're going to have a different match.
DDP is, in theory, he can talk.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be what has to sell this thing. Is you're going to have to get it over, and you need a spokesman. And
you
Dallas
need some good
started
talkers
out
in this
as
thing.
primarily a mouth, and he'll always be primarily a mouth, even though he turned himself into a reasonable worker.
Right. I mean, I thought his interview was pretty fair in the sense that he was saying, "Make me famous," like that.
Yeah, well, that was a tough spot, and I'm not sure he did as well as he would have liked to, but.
Well, again, I want to thank you, and Bill, you need to come back soon.
So,
Take care, guys.
Okay, we're going to go to Mike. I think Mike, you're going to be our last caller.
Hey, good evening. How you doing? A little word about the UCW guys in Queens here to run the Elks Lodge. They're going to be doing Sports Fest in Staten Island on old ECW horn, and after that, they're doing Jersey. The guy who runs it has it's Ultimate Cards and Comics. It's kind of a video card shop. He used to always have whenever WWF or people would be in town, they'd be in for autograph sessions. That's how he got into wrestling. He rents videotapes and stuff. So if you're doing New York City here, the WWF syndicated show is on a Long Island station. If you want to get on a New York proper station, it's pretty expensive.
Oh,
no, that's impossible.
Ask ECW.
Expensive is the wrong word. It's $1 million cost, or at least for a certain time period over a $500,000 just to get on and at all.
Forget it. WOW was on 2 a.m. on the Fox station, and that was even a nice buck.
Well, and I have a feeling they probably still owe money.
I think so. If you look at the ECW bankruptcy filing, MSG was basically being paid a few bucks a week to even stay on the air. I'm surprised ECW was even on the air with MSG.
MSG was paying, well, actually, ECW did a very good job hanging on with a diversity of television entities when they weren't paying.
Yeah.
And they actually did a wonderful job doing that. Steve Carroll actually jumped through hoops there.
It was a little, how would you say, shell game going on there, too.
One of the keys at stations is once they have you in too much debt, any money they get is money that they can put into the bank, and so they'll string it out, and they'll actually keep you on for at least a while.
Yeah.
And they work that gimmick as well as anybody ever has.
And, by the way, Dave, I tuned in a little late. I heard a few of the names from OVW, Keck, Howell, and,
Turkey were the only OVW guys
Those the only guys I heard?
Those are the only OVW guys dropped, but there are a lot of developmental. Most of the Memphis guys seems like about 2/3 of them.
Yeah, I read that. It's basically would you call it a consolidation?
No,
I think that they got rid of the ones that they didn't think were going to make it.
You're kind of combining Les and OVW there, kind of going back and forth a little bit.
Certainly.
You say that?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Plus,
you know, because
they're
that Les's promotion is 90 minutes away from Corning.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And so they have the ability to run a circuit with Corny helping, because Les has never been that good at running the house shows. So if they the key of what WWF wants is ideally they want the USWA system, where you're running 4 or 5 days a week and keeping the boys busy.
Yeah.
Because that's the key of development system. And the problem anybody else has is how much they run and how much work the guys can get and whether they like what they're doing. And that's the gravy on it. So anybody that they may eliminate, like Memphis, or modify other deals, they're looking at, are they delivering across all the layers? I mean, anybody can put a damn ring in a building and call it a school. But at the end result is you have to keep them out there, even if it's 20 people in the fucking audience.
And if you
my deal with WCW, I was paid based on how many shows I ran. The key was the more I did, the better I was doing, even if there were 4 people and a chicken in the audience.
And by the way, Dave, when you see talent being cut, it's not like they can't pick and choose who they want anyway. Like you see them having Chris Daniels and Scoot Andrews in TV taping matches.
Oh, of course
they
can get
want people. They can't. They
can get anyone they want, and they're not. You know. Here's the thing. They're not poor.
I know.
And they can afford anything they want to do right now,
but
and probably
guys,
for the next several years.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys have kind of been there for a while, like you mentioned. You know, you got to bring them up or cut them loose. You know?
Yeah, well, sooner or later.
That's why they were cut loose.
That's why they were cut loose.
You can't be the welfare house for wrestlers and need to work sometimes, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but the WWF will always have a spot for the guys that have brought them to the party.
Yeah.
You know, I have a feeling that Calloway and all of the other guys, when they decide not to wrestle anymore, will have jobs backstage.
No, I'm talking about just keeping on guys, a lot of these, workers just for the sake of it. You know what I mean? Just letting them stay up there.
Well, you can't do that. You can't do that.
Think of it at any real level. Vince is not that kind of businessman.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, we are totally out of time. I want to thank you so much, Bill, for coming by.
Thank you.
And we'll have you on again. And tomorrow we're going to have Roland Alexander, and we'll see everybody tomorrow at 5.